This is our first lecture that's going to be taking place. We're going to cover the breakdown of philosophy into the major points that are covered in your textbook. You start out with, in Chapter 1, the traditional divisions of philosophy, and metaphysics, which is the study of reality, epistemology, the study of knowledge, and so on. And then in Chapter 2, you, of course, you get some of the dialogues also in Chapter 1 from Plato about Socrates. And then Chapter 2 expands a little bit more on this idea of value of human nature and how human nature relates into the study of philosophy. And you have various positions on that. Of course, we don't want to take out the only section I don't want to look at yet because it really doesn't apply. It's a little out of place, is the mind-body problem. That one does not apply in Chapter 2. That would actually come later when we study the theory of mind and so on. But Velasquez tries to attach it to dualism and materialism, and it really is, when we get to lecture, is just a different topic altogether. So that one's the only one that's out of place in the whole textbook, but everything else fits, and you do have dialogues again from Plato all the way up to 2.7 in the textbook. We don't need to cover Aristotle at this point. Aristotle will come after the first quiz. We have enough in chapters 1 and 2 up through, excluding 2.2, you want to leave out the philosophy of mind part. And mind-body dualism, you want to leave that part out. So all the way up through 2.1 and 2.2 about what is human nature, and that is where we'll stop in the condensed version. So up to page 81 is where we're focusing on. And I'll be, of course, elaborating quite a bit more on the material of the textbook, but we cover some of these sections as we get started here. I'm going to give you a PowerPoint that you can look at, which is going to give you the basic breakdown of what philosophy is about. So we have our opening cell, the introduction to philosophy, philosophy 1, and I'm trying to get it to go here. And so our basics then is the philosophy, of course, is the pursuit of wisdom. It's not wisdom itself, and that's something that we're chasing after. And so the basics that the course is broken down into is metaphysics, which is the study of reality, and epistemology, the study of knowledge. These are explained in your book. Study of knowledge is broken down into 2 parts. We want to know for accurate information, and of course we're still in this question of whether we know through the senses or we know through the mind. And what's chasing after that topic is appearance and reality. Do we really know this world, okay, or is it just all appearance because it changes so much? And these are important questions because they've set the pace. Even through today, we have phenomenology, which is toward the end of your text a little bit. And that's basically where we are at. The pragmatists, of course, are going to say, and I think you students would agree, I know I would, that what we know is what we can use. That's what the pragmatists think, and that doesn't occur until the 20th century. So pragmatism is quite late in formulation. The reason why is because there were other problems that the theory of knowledge was addressing. So we start out with appearance and reality. Is the world actually absolutely so? That's also the study of metaphysics. Or is it all appearance because it changes and we can never really know it, even if we're sensing it? Why is it somebody senses one thing one way and somebody senses it different? So that's part of our questions of epistemology. And again, like I said, we're still not through with that. People will still ask that question today. If you read on Yahoo, people have their comments, and sometimes those comments are quite interesting. And some of these questions will come back at us on some of those comments. So they haven't gone away. Ethics, how people ought to behave, very central to today. Okay, I was just watching this morning on the news that people can hack your fingerprints. Okay, so they got pictures of people holding up their hands, waving, George Clooney waving, and so on. And somebody took a picture of that hand and managed to copy the fingerprint. So be careful as you scroll on your iPhone, because apparently they can duplicate that and get into your accounts. So that's dangerous, all right? Now, of course, this is something we ought not to do. We should be able to trust people. This is why people get angry, because the level of trust has sunk so far low. But in terms of hackers, it's been a beautiful thing happening, and they're hacking everywhere, so you want to be careful. But this is what ethics studies. Should we focus on character? Okay, that would be virtue ethics. That would be Aristotle and Plato. Should we focus on happiness? Okay, that's where the hackers are. And that's utilitarianism. That's Jeremy Bentham. Or should we focus on what we should do, which is Kant? Okay, that's duty ethics. So these are good questions. Nothing is a perfect answer, and that's part of the problem with ethics. The Greeks, I think, get the closest to finding the perfect answers, but there's some open room for free will, and that's what's causing the majority of our problems. It's nice to say that we have choice, but should we make that choice? Okay. Now, if you're in a situation with Nazi Germany, you're going to want that free will. What if I don't want to follow Hitler? Okay. So free will is a tricky question. It can get you into trouble, but it can also get you out of trouble. And so that's why ethics is a very, very important part of our human nature as well. That goes over in the textbook. And also very important in terms of philosophy. Philosophy is the only discipline that studies ethics. Science does not. Religion doesn't. Okay, religion is based on your belief in the other world. And of course, art is our personal expression in culture. So philosophy is the only discipline that studies ethics, and there's a great deal written on ethics. That's what's centered with the Greeks. And of course, we are having trouble today with ethics. We need to get a suitable ethics code out there. And right now, actually, we have none. That was due to philosophy as well. We argued our way out of it. But we'll get into that. But obviously, we need ethics. And then religion. Religion, we have in your book, I focused on, remember this is the condensed version and the 12th edition focuses mostly on our Western philosophers. This is Western philosophy. And so we start with the Greeks and focus on the Western tradition. You do have some of the Eastern tradition brought into your textbook. They do a good job of that. Not many Western philosophers really touched on anything in Eastern philosophy, not many at all. I would say 3 at most. Had an interest in anything going on the other side of the world. Everything else stems pretty much from the Greeks. So in religion, you can cover, the religious scholars who are trying to resolve problems with Christianity, the Judeo-Christian tradition. Islam does not get drawn into this. Islam is pretty much ignored, pretty much. It has to argue for itself. But mostly the questions of this revealed religion, this revealed God, this God that knows everything. And we are subject to these wills of extra powers, not only just in the Judeo-Christian tradition, but any religion. You are subject to the greater powers. Yeah. So that's our 4 basic breakdown in philosophy. We have metaphysics, which is where we start, the study of reality. What is this world made of? Epistemology, how we know what we know. Okay, we want to know with absolute certainty, and that's the quest. Ethics, how we ought to behave, and then religion, which has multiple questions. Again, metaphysics, okay, our next cell, study of reality, what is the basis of the world. You have in your book a mention of some of the pre-Socratics, those who come before Socrates, and we'll get into that a little bit. But this is the quest of the pre-Socratics, and it pretty much stops. It starts in 600 BC, and it stops with Aristotle. After Aristotle, we no longer ask this question because the Judeo-Christian tradition takes over and pretty much stops philosophy. That's where you hit your dark ages and nothing is going on. We're in the darkness of lack of knowledge of external sources, and only the Bible is supposed to be our source of knowledge. And so philosophy stops at that point. It's a very important question. Okay, if we don't know what the basis of everything is, what we're looking for is a foundation for everything, an absolute rock-solid foundation of everything. And once we find that out, this is what the pre-Socratics are looking for, then we're going to put our politics on top of it and our education, and everything else is going to build on top of it. Okay. We're still looking for that today. We would love to know. This is why we're way out in outer space. Okay, just how far back do we go to that Big Bang? Okay, we're looking for that absolute certainty. That's really what we're looking for. So God came in and replaced the world as absolute certainty. God comes in and I know everything, I'm the creator, and everything starts from me. And so that's what stopped this pursuit. It gets an early start with a lot of changes. The original basics to everything was the family unit. The Egyptians, the Chinese, even Confucius is dealing with this issue. The Greeks, the Romans, everybody had family as the basis to all things. we get one playwright at the time. His name is Sophocles, who writes Oedipus Rex and Antigone, and he's writing his head off trying to convince the rest of the Greeks not to move the way of reason, which is where we've been since Socrates and Plato, to stick with the family. He says that when you break it all down in my plays, who do we reach out to when problems occur? The world? No, we reach out to each other, the family first, technically. As we've had this recent killing in New York of the hedge fund owner and his son. Okay? So people go to one another. Sometimes you get help and sometimes you don't, all right? But the family unit, this is what Sophocles is saying. Oedipus Rex, when he dies at the end, he's reaching out, he can't see, he's reaching for his daughters. So Sophocles is realizing there's going to be a big historical change in ancient Greece, a change in the point of view of the search for the basis to all things. And Sophocles is saying you're making a big mistake if you go the way of reason. It's really the family. Okay. And certainly Plato's going to get into it, and his basis for all things is going to be ethics, okay, the theory of the good. So this is what our pre-Socratics are going to be studying. They're spending, roughly 400 years doing this. Confucius, in the Eastern tradition, is going to stay with the family. He doesn't make a change, okay, and that's pretty much stayed the way of the Asian culture altogether, is with the family. So he managed to retain the family unit, whereas we changed. We went from the family, we were becoming bigger in culture, we were getting city-states, it was harder to manage the family, and so reason seemed the basic common denominator. Okay. Now that's also going to bring in human nature, which is discussed in your text. Of course, Aristotle didn't feel that women had much reason, okay? So we have problems with that. But, and of course, later on, we realized that reason is not gender-based, okay? But for Aristotle, it was. I was just having my Chinese horoscope done, and I found out that women have their number done differently than men do. So now, according to the ancient Chinese, good luck is based on gender. So I don't know. That's always a good question, is point of view, right? Perspective. Okay. Our next cell discusses epistemology, how we know what we know. We have two basic ways that we know. Again, I go over this in our basic video on the website of Etudes. But either know through the senses, okay, or through the mind. And again, the question is, what is the means to certain knowledge? Right. Now, not every philosopher writes on everything, okay, but we do have many who do. And so our people who go the way of reason, of course, are going to be the Greeks, Socrates, Plato. Now, Aristotle is going to go the way of the senses. Okay? And then we move up into our modern times. We have Descartes, okay? And then also Leibniz and Spinoza. Okay? So that's our Western tradition of people that are going to be studying knowledge, how we know what we know. In fact, this becomes very important in our modern times because that's going to be the basis to our reality, okay, knowledge. And we go the way of logic and science. Okay. So that basis to reality is changing. It doesn't change often. First we start with the family, then we go with the way of reason, and then we get the Judeo-God, and then now we have Descartes with the mind, and that's where we've stayed now. Okay, we're still with the mind. There are others who believe that actually the senses are more accurate. Okay, they reach absolute certain knowledge. Either something feels solid, okay, or it doesn't. Okay. So how can my senses really, really be fooling me? So, and this is where we've ended up also. Even though we want knowledge as the basis to all things, what kind of knowledge? Sensory knowledge. All right. So for our empiricists, as it's called, sensory experience to knowledge, we have Aristotle, and then we make our jump over the church, and then we come into John Locke and Bishop Berkeley and David Hume. Okay, our next cell is ethics. Three basic kinds of ethics. There are many, and your videos are going to cover quite a bit. But the three basic kinds are consequentialism, which is where we are now, utilitarianism. Duty ethics, which was given a try, but it didn't survive, and that was also modern. And then virtue ethics, which deals with the character, developing the person. Okay. So virtue ethics had the longest run. Okay, we don't even know when it started, and it lasted up until the 1700s. We wanted to change with the modern worldview, and so we tried to instill consequentialism. We have a loose basis of it, a utilitarianism, goodness based on pleasure, bad is pain. And you want to maximize pleasure. And of course, we have problems with this because we have an informal, a loose sense of utilitarianism. We don't have all of the rules that Bentham laid down, Jeremy Bentham, for utilitarianism in force. We only have just the general idea of pleasure and pain. And there's reasons for that, which I'll get into when we get to that specific lecture. When you watch your videos, you're going to have a good dose of Aristotle and his. You won't be getting much of Plato, and you'll get some of Socrates in video 4 and video 1 also. But theory of knowledge or ethics is pretty old. It's a nice question. Plato and Socrates want to know if we acquire virtue, if we acquire being ethical, either through being taught as a form of knowledge, or if we just simply have these rules and we go out and practice them. And they believe that it's a form of knowledge. Okay, now they're the only two who ask that particular question. They're the only two who break it down to either we know it or we go out and practice it. Everybody else, including Confucius, assumes that it's taught to us. Okay, that's why you study the Bible, and then you go out and practice what the Bible says. Okay? Everybody else pretty much takes it as the two together. But curiously, because they want to get the question right, Plato and Socrates are going to go with the way of its knowledge. Okay, so it's acquired. Somebody gave us this knowledge, and they say it's going to be the gods. The gods gave us knowledge of how to be good. Again, you have problems of free will, okay, and determinism. These are still unanswered questions. We obviously have free will. People choose to do otherwise, and sometimes they regret their choices, so that's free will. Some are going to argue that, hey, those choices were actually predetermined by some other cause. It's questionable. It's questionable. You know what to do, but you still do something else. So sometimes I believe that there's truly free will in there. Okay, nobody's forcing you to do it, and so you made a choice to do something. And then we have universals and particulars. Universals means that ethics is the same for everybody. Okay, it's universal, and right and wrong is the same for everybody. And particulars, or relativism, which you're going to have a very nice DVD video on relativism, moral relativism, and that's going to discuss that it's not just that values vary per culture, but values vary. Okay. So it's not that somebody else does something and then we do something is right, but there are also generic things like killing and so on that are relative issues, and that it depends on how you apply the idea of thou shalt not kill and so on. You know, when you look at the situation, Ferguson, of course it was the theft that started it, that led to the phone call to the police who came, and then we had the killing. All right, so we have 5 parts there. You can look at that in absolutes. You could say thou shouldn't have stolen, and thou should not kill. I mean, now you have 2 conflicting moral attributes that can be taken as absolutes, or you could say one led to the other. You had free will, you stole, and then that led to the ultimate killing. All right. However you want to look at it, universals would be the absolutes: thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. Or you can look at particulars that, well, if you hadn't stolen, then that ultimately would have led to the situation. A lot of difficult issues, right? Ethics is not a simple issue. It's not just a matter of don't plagiarize or don't steal or don't lie. These acts affect other people. They affect you. Okay, so virtue and character. So ethics is extremely important. Unfortunately, it's not an exact science.